Chapter 1. The Feathered Stranger. Ethan Reed had always found solace in the quiet life. After years spent working in the chaos of urban laboratories as a biologist, he traded the cacophony of city life for the tranquil embrace of nature. His home was a modest cabin nestled deep in the forest, surrounded by miles of untouched wilderness. Here, he lived a life of routine, cataloging plants, observing animals, and living among the simplicity of Earth's untamed beauty. It wasn't that Ethan hated people. He simply felt more at ease among creatures that didn't wear masks of civility while harboring greed or deceit. Nature, for all its unpredictability, was honest. A predator hunted because it needed food, not because it sought power or wealth. A bird sang to claim its territory or attract a mate, not to manipulate or deceive. In Ethan's mind, there was a purity in that simplicity. That evening, as the setting sun painted the sky with streaks of orange and purple, Ethan packed up his gear after another day of observation. His journal was filled with notes on local flora and fauna, his camera loaded with photographs of deer grazing in the distance and fox kits playing by their den. But as he began the trek back to his cabin, something unusual caught his attention. It was faint at first, a high-pitched, melodic sound that seemed out of place among the usual forest symphony. Ethan paused, his ears straining to locate the source. The sound wasn't like any bird call he recognized. It was more like a song delicate and haunting, with a strange, otherworldly quality. Curiosity piqued, Ethan veered off his usual path, pushing through underbrush and stepping carefully over roots. The sound grew louder, guiding him deeper into the forest. Soon, he came upon a small clearing bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. And there, lying in the grass, was a bird unlike any he had ever seen. An unusual find. The bird was breathtaking. Its feathers shimmered like liquid metal, shifting colors as it moved. Shades of deep violet melted into gold, then into a soft teal, before cycling back again. Its eyes, large and intelligent, were a piercing silver, almost luminescent. But what struck Ethan most was the way it moved. Unlike other injured birds he had encountered, this one didn't panic or flail. It lay still, watching him with a steady gaze that seemed to hold a depth of understanding far beyond that of any animal. Ethan knelt slowly, his movements deliberate to avoid startling the creature. Its left wing was bent at an awkward angle, and the feathers along its side were matted with blood. The sight of its injury stirred a pang of sympathy in Ethan's chest. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not going to hurt you." To his astonishment, the bird didn't try to flee. Instead, it tilted its head, studying him as though it understood his words. Ethan extended a hand, pausing a few inches from the bird to let it decide whether to trust him. After a moment's hesitation, the bird relaxed, its sharp eyes never leaving his face. "Well, aren't you something special?" Ethan murmured, marveling at the creature's beauty. He carefully removed his jacket and used it to gently scoop up the bird, mindful of its injured wing. The bird let out a soft chirp, not of protest, but almost as if it were thanking him. As he carried it back to his cabin, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was something extraordinary about this bird. He had studied avian species for years, and yet he couldn't recall anything remotely similar to this creature. It wasn't just the iridescent feathers or the unusual size. It was the way it looked at him, with an intelligence that seemed almost human. Back at the cabin. Ethan's cabin was a cozy space, filled with the tools of his trade. Microscopes, vials, notebooks, and bookshelves packed with field guides and scientific journals. The walls were adorned with sketches of animals he had observed over the years, alongside photographs of rare plants and sunsets over the forest. It was a home built for solitude, a sanctuary for a man who sought peace in the natural world. He set the bird down on his workbench, careful not to jostle its injured wing. The creature watched him intently as he gathered supplies. A pair of scissors, antiseptic, and bandages. Ethan spoke softly as he worked, more to reassure the bird than himself. "You're lucky I found you," he said, dabbing at the dried blood on its feathers. "Whatever happened out there, you took quite a hit. But don't worry, I've patched up plenty of injured animals before. You're in good hands." The bird let out a soft trill, a sound so melodic and haunting that it sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. He paused, glancing at it. "You're not like anything I've seen before, are you?" The bird didn't respond, of course, but its gaze remained locked on him, unblinking and almost unnervingly focused. Ethan shook his head, dismissing the thought. He had encountered plenty of strange creatures in his career. This was just another mystery waiting to be solved. Once the bird's wing was cleaned and bandaged, Ethan placed it in a large wicker basket lined with soft towels. "You'll need to rest," he said. "No flying for a while. I'll figure out what you are and get you back to where you belong." The bird let out another soft chirp, and Ethan swore it nodded slightly before settling into the basket. The night's mystery. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The events of the day played over in his mind, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw the bird's piercing silver gaze staring back at him. He found himself drawn to his workbench, where the bird was resting. It was still awake, its glowing eyes watching him from the basket. "I don't know why, but I feel like you understand me," Ethan said, sitting down beside the basket. "Crazy, right? Talking to a bird like it's going to talk back." The bird tilted its head, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw the faintest flicker of amusement in its expression. He shook his head, chuckling softly. "I need to get some sleep." As he stood to leave, the bird let out a low, musical trill different from the sound it had made earlier. Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. The sound wasn't just a noise. It was words. "Thank you," the bird said, its voice soft and melodic. Ethan's heart pounded as he turned back to the basket, his eyes wide. "Did you just talk?" The bird didn't respond, but its gaze remained steady. Ethan stepped closer, his mind racing. "This can't be real. Birds don't talk not like that. What are you?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, the bird's form began to shimmer. Its feathers glowed brightly, shifting and rippling like liquid light. Ethan stumbled back, his jaw dropping as the bird's shape began to change. Its body elongated, its wings folding inward as they transformed into slender arms. The shimmering feathers receded, revealing smooth, pale skin. Within moments, the bird was gone, replaced by a young woman with silvery hair and piercing silver eyes. Ethan stared, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. You're not a bird." The woman no, the alien smiled faintly. "No," she said softly, "but you saved me, and for that, I owe you my life." The chapter ends. Ethan sat down heavily in his chair, his hands trembling. The woman's presence filled the room with an otherworldly energy, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You have questions," she said, her voice calm and melodic. "I will answer them. But first, promise me one thing." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "What?" "Promise me you won't tell anyone." The chapter ends with Ethan staring at her, his mind a whirlwind of fear, curiosity, and wonder as he contemplates the mystery that has just unfolded in his quiet, predictable life. Chapter 2. The Truth About Her World. Ethan sat frozen in his chair, his gaze locked on the silver-eyed woman who now stood before him. The transformation he had just witnessed defied every law of biology he had ever known. Moments ago, she had been an injured bird, unique, yes, but still seemingly terrestrial. Now, she was something else entirely. A humanoid alien. Ethan began, his voice faltering. He wasn't sure how to phrase the million questions tumbling through his mind. "Who, or what, are you?" The woman tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes glimmering like liquid mercury. Her posture was calm, but there was a certain weariness to her movements, as if she carried the weight of countless secrets. "My name is Alara," she said, her voice as soft and melodic as the trills she had made in her avian form. "And I am not of your world." "No kidding," Ethan muttered, running a hand through his hair. He leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his shock. "How is this even possible? The transformation, your physiology, none of it makes sense." Alara offered a faint smile. "Not by the rules of your world, no, but my kind. We have long since transcended the limitations of static forms. What you saw is an ability we call kinetic morphing. It allows us to adapt to different environments and situations." Ethan frowned, trying to wrap his head around the concept. "So, you can turn into anything?" "Not quite," Alara replied, shaking her head. "There are limits. I can mimic life forms that are compatible with my natural state, but the process requires energy. Injuries, like the one I sustained, make maintaining a form much more difficult. Ethan nodded slowly, his mind racing. He wanted to ask more about her biology, her species, her home, but another question loomed larger in his mind. What happened to you? How did you end up here, injured, in the middle of a forest on Earth? Alara's story. Alara's expression darkened, and for a moment, her luminous eyes flickered with something that looked like pain. I am a scout, she began, her voice quieter now. My people known as the Elinari are travelers. We explore the far reaches of the universe, seeking knowledge, resources, and sometimes refuge. For centuries, we have drifted from system to system, adapting to the worlds we encounter. Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Refuge? Are you running from something? Alara hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. Finally, she nodded. Yes, my people are refugees, scattered across the stars after our homeworld was destroyed. Ethan's stomach tightened. Destroyed? By what? Her gaze dropped to the floor. A force known only as the Void. It is a consuming darkness, a phenomenon that devours entire systems, leaving nothing but emptiness in its wake. We do not know its origin or purpose, only that it is relentless. Ethan exhaled sharply, the gravity of her words sinking in. So, you've been on the run ever since? Alara nodded. My people travel in small fleets, each group seeking a place to call home. I was sent to this region of space to scout potential habitats when my vessel was attacked. Attacked? Ethan repeated. By who? Her expression hardened. The Hunters. They are agents of the Void, merciless beings who pursue those who flee its path. They crippled my ship, forcing me to crash land here. I assumed my avian form to blend in, but I was injured during the crash. I did not expect to survive. Ethan sat back in his chair, struggling to process everything. So, you've been hiding here, injured and alone, because these hunters are after you? Yes, Alara said simply. And now that I've revealed myself to you, they will come for you as well. Ethan's pulse quickened. Wait, what? Why? The hunters can track my energy signature, Alara explained. Your involvement will not go unnoticed. A warning of danger. Ethan stood abruptly, pacing the room as the weight of Alara's revelations settled over him. His quiet, predictable life had just been shattered, and now he was facing the prospect of alien assassins targeting him. What are we supposed to do? He demanded. You said these hunters are relentless. How do we stop them? Alara's silver eyes followed his movements. We can't stop them, not entirely, but we can delay them, disrupt their tracking systems, and buy ourselves time. Ethan stopped pacing, his gaze narrowing. And then what? Hope they get bored and leave us alone? No, Alara said, her voice firm. We prepare. The hunters are powerful, but they are not invincible. With your help, I can repair my communication device and call for reinforcements. Reinforcements? Ethan echoed, his skepticism clear. From where? You said your people are scattered across the galaxy. They are, Alara admitted. But there are safe havens, hidden enclaves where my people have gathered. If I can reach them, they will send aid. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. This was far beyond anything he had ever prepared for. He had expected to spend his days cataloging bird species, not battling intergalactic threats. But as he looked at Alara, her silver eyes filled with quiet resolve, he knew he couldn't abandon her. She had trusted him with her life, and now he felt a strange responsibility to protect her. All right, he said finally. What do we need to do? The first step. Alara retrieved a small, cylindrical device from the folds of her clothing. It was damaged, its surface scorched and cracked, but its faint glow indicated it still had some functionality. This is my communicator, she explained. It's partially operational, but it needs a new power source. Ethan frowned. What kind of power source? Something that can generate sustained energy at high frequencies, Alara replied. Your planet's technology is primitive, but I've seen similar energy patterns in your electrical grids. If we can access a high-capacity generator, I can modify it to recharge the device. Ethan nodded slowly. There's a hydroelectric dam a few miles from here. It's old, but it generates plenty of power. We might be able to rig something up. Alara's eyes brightened with hope. Then we should go quickly. The hunters won't wait long before they track my location. A new resolve. As they prepared to leave, Ethan couldn't help but feel a growing sense of determination. His life of solitude had given him the tools to navigate the wilderness, and his background in biology and engineering provided the knowledge to help Alara. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of purpose, something worth fighting for. Alara watched him silently as he packed a bag with supplies. "You are brave," she said softly. "Few would risk so much for someone they barely know." Ethan glanced at her, offering a faint smile. "I'm not sure if it's bravery or stupidity, but I couldn't just leave you out there to die. And now that I know what's at stake, I'm in this for the long haul." Alara nodded, her silver eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you, Ethan. Your kindness may be the reason I survive." As they stepped out into the cool night air, the forest around them seemed to hold its breath. The stars above glimmered like distant beacons, and the faint rustle of leaves was the only sound. Together, they set off toward the dam, unaware of the shadowy figures that had already begun closing in on their location. The chapter ends with the tension rising, as Ethan and Alara prepare to face the hunters and protect the secrets that could save or doom them both. Chapter 3. The Hunters' Arrival. The journey to the hydroelectric dam was tense and quiet. The only sounds the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional rustle of branches swaying in the wind. Ethan carried his pack, loaded with tools and supplies he thought they might need. Beside him, Alara moved with an eerie grace, her silvery hair shimmering faintly in the moonlight. Ethan couldn't help but glance at her from time to time, still struggling to wrap his head around what she truly was. She seemed so human, yet there was no denying the otherworldly quality of her presence. Her silver eyes scanned the forest constantly, her movements deliberate and alert. "Do you think they found us yet?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. Alara hesitated before answering. "The hunters are methodical. They won't rush in blindly. But once they lock onto my energy signature, they won't stop until they reach us." Ethan frowned. "And how exactly do we fight them if they do show up?" Alara stopped and turned to him, her gaze serious. "We don't fight them, Ethan. Not directly. The hunters are stronger, faster, and more advanced than anything you've ever faced. Our best chance is to stay ahead of them." "And if we can't?" Ethan pressed. Alara's expression hardened. "Then I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." The dam. By the time they reached the hydroelectric dam, the first hints of dawn were beginning to light the sky. The old structure loomed over a rushing river, its turbines humming faintly as water cascaded through the spillways. The air was cool and damp, filled with the steady roar of the river. "This is it," Ethan said, leading Alara toward the control station. The building was small and weathered, its metal doors rusted and creaking on their hinges. Inside, the control panels were covered in dust, but the equipment still seemed operational. Alara surveyed the room, her silver eyes scanning the machinery with precision. "This will work," she said, her voice laced with relief. "The turbines generate enough energy to recharge the communicator. I'll need your help to modify the connection." Ethan nodded, already unpacking his tools. "Just tell me what to do." The two of them worked quickly, dismantling parts of the control panel and rerouting power cables. Alara's knowledge of energy systems was astounding, and Ethan found himself marveling at how easily she adapted to Earth's technology. Together, they created a makeshift connection, running a direct line from the dam's generator to Alara's damaged communicator. As they worked, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced over his shoulder repeatedly, his nerves on edge. "You feel it too," Alara said quietly, not looking up from her work. "Feel what?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. "The hunters," Alara replied. "They're close." The first strike. The attack came without warning. One moment, the dam was quiet except for the hum of the turbines. The next, a deafening explosion rocked the building, sending shards of metal and concrete flying. Ethan ducked instinctively, his heart pounding as dust and debris filled the air. "They're here," Alara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Ethan scrambled to his feet, his eyes widening as he saw the first hunter step through the hole in the wall. The creature was humanoid but distinctly alien, its sleek, black armor gleaming in the dim light. Its face was hidden behind a visor, and its weapon, a jagged, energy-based rifle, glowed ominously. "Get behind me," Alara ordered, stepping in front of Ethan. Before he could protest, the hunter raised its weapon and fired. Alara moved with inhuman speed, her form blurring as she dodged the energy blast. She retaliated with a pulse of silver light, her hand glowing as she sent a wave of kinetic energy crashing into the hunter. The force slammed it into the far wall, where it crumpled to the ground, motionless. Ethan's mouth fell open. "How did you dash?" "No time to explain," Alara said, grabbing his arm. "There will be more." As if on cue, 2 more hunters appeared, their movements precise and coordinated. They opened fire, forcing Ethan and Alara to dive for cover. The room filled with the sounds of energy blasts and shattering metal as the hunters advanced. Ethan's hands trembled as he fumbled for anything that could be used as a weapon. His eyes landed on a heavy wrench lying nearby, and he grabbed it, though he knew it would be useless against the hunter's advanced armor. "Stay down," Alara shouted, emerging from cover to engage the attackers. A desperate defense. Alara fought with a ferocity Ethan had never seen before. Her movements were fluid and precise, each strike imbued with the same glowing energy she had used earlier. She leapt and dodged with unnatural agility, her glowing hands deflecting incoming blasts and sending out waves of energy that staggered the hunters. But the hunters were relentless. One of them managed to flank Alara, firing a shot that grazed her shoulder. She cried out, the glow around her faltering for a moment. Ethan's heart lurched. Without thinking, he sprang from his hiding spot and hurled the wrench at the nearest hunter. It struck the creature's visor with a loud clang, momentarily distracting it. "Ethan, get back!" Alara shouted, but it was too late. The second hunter turned its weapon on Ethan, its glowing barrel aimed directly at his chest. Time seemed to slow as Ethan braced for the inevitable. Then, Alara was there. She moved faster than Ethan's eyes could follow, placing herself between him and the hunter. A burst of silver light erupted from her outstretched hands, engulfing the hunter in a wave of energy. The creature let out a guttural sound before collapsing to the ground, its armor sparking and smoking. Breathing heavily, Alara turned to Ethan, her silver eyes blazing. "I told you to stay down. You were outnumbered." Ethan shot back, his voice shaking. "I couldn't just sit there and watch you get killed." Alara's expression softened, but before she could respond, the final hunter charged toward them, its weapon raised. Alara's glow intensified as she prepared to strike, but her movements were slower now, her injuries taking their toll. Ethan's eyes darted to the control panel, where the communicator was still connected to the generator. An idea formed in his mind, reckless, but their only chance. "Alara, buy me some time," he shouted, sprinting toward the panel. Turning the tide, Ethan's hands flew over the controls, rerouting the remaining power from the dam into the makeshift connection. The turbines groaned as they pushed beyond their capacity, and sparks flew from the cables. The final hunter advanced on Alara, its jagged weapon glowing brighter as it prepared to fire. Alara summoned the last of her strength, launching a desperate wave of energy that staggered the creature but didn't bring it down. "Ethan, hurry!" she cried, her voice laced with exhaustion. "I'm almost there," Ethan shouted back, flipping the final switch. The generator roared to life, and a surge of energy shot through the communicator. A blinding pulse of silver light filled the room, enveloping the hunter in its glow. When the light faded, the creature was gone, reduced to nothing but ash. Ethan collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. Alara sank to her knees beside him, her glow dim but steady. "You did it," she said softly, her silver eyes meeting his. "No," Ethan replied, managing a faint smile. "We did it." The chapter's cliffhanger. As the room fell silent, the communicator emitted a faint beep. Alara picked it up, her expression unreadable as she examined the device. "What now?" Ethan asked. Alara looked at him, her gaze serious. "I've sent the signal. If my people receive it, they'll come for us. But the hunters won't stop. This was only the beginning." The chapter ends with Ethan and Alara preparing for the next wave of danger, their fragile alliance growing stronger as they face the unknown together. Chapter 4. The Final Stand. The air in the hydroelectric dam felt heavy, charged with the residual energy from their desperate defense. Ethan slumped against a wall, his chest heaving as he tried to steady his breath. Beside him, Alara cradled the repaired communicator in her hands, her silvery glow flickering faintly as she recovered from the battle. "They'll come," she said softly, her voice tinged with both hope and apprehension. "My people will answer the signal, but it won't be fast enough." Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow, forcing himself to his feet. "How much time do we have before the next wave?" Alara shook her head. "Minutes, maybe. The hunters are relentless. They'll regroup and adapt. They always do." The thought of facing more of those alien trackers made Ethan's stomach churn, but he forced himself to focus. "We need a plan. Something that'll buy us enough time for your people to arrive." Alara's silver eyes met his, a flicker of doubt crossing her features. "There may be a way, but it's dangerous." Ethan crossed his arms. "At this point, dangerous is the least of my worries." "What is it?" Alara hesitated, her gaze dropping to the communicator in her hands. "The dam's turbines generate an immense amount of energy. If we overload the system, we could create an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disrupt the hunter's technology." Ethan's eyes widened. "You're talking about blowing the dam?" "Yes," Alara said quietly. "It would disable their weapons and tracking systems, but it would also destroy this entire facility and us, if we don't escape in time." Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. It was a last-ditch effort, but he couldn't see any other way. The hunters wouldn't stop until they had Alara or until they were destroyed. "All right," he said finally. "Let's do it." Setting the trap, Alara guided Ethan through the process of overloading the dam's turbines. It was a delicate and dangerous operation, requiring them to reroute power lines and disable safety protocols. Sparks flew as they worked, the machinery groaning under the strain. "Are you sure this will work?" Ethan asked, his voice tense. "It has to," Alara replied, her tone unwavering. "The EMP will only last a few minutes, but it should be enough to cripple the hunters." "And what about us?" Ethan pressed. "How do we get out of here before this place goes up?" Alara hesitated. "There's an access tunnel that leads to the river. If we time it right, we can escape before the turbines detonate." "If we time it right," Ethan muttered, shaking his head. "Great." As they worked, the faint sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the facility. Alara's head snapped up, her silver eyes narrowing. "They're here." Ethan's pulse quickened. "How many?" "Too many," Alara said grimly. "They've brought reinforcements." Ethan swallowed hard, gripping the wrench he had used earlier. "I'll hold them off. You finish setting the overload." "No," Alara said firmly, stepping in front of him. "You won't stand a chance against them." "And you will?" Ethan shot back. Alara's expression softened, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I've faced them before. I know how they think. But you, Ethan, you've already done more than I could have asked for. Let me protect you this time." Ethan hesitated, his heart pounding. "Just promise me you'll come back." "I promise," Alara said softly, her silver eyes glistening. The final battle. The hunters came in force, their sleek, black armor glinting under the dim lights of the dam. Alara moved like a blur, her glowing hands sending waves of kinetic energy crashing into their ranks. The air was filled with the sound of energy blasts and shattering metal as the battle raged. Ethan watched from the control room, his stomach churning with worry. He could see the strain in Alara's movements, the way her glow flickered with each attack. She was holding them off, but for how long? Come on, Ethan muttered as he worked furiously to complete the overload sequence. The turbines groaned, their hum growing louder as they pushed beyond their limits. Outside, Alara was a whirlwind of energy, dodging and striking with precision. But the hunters were relentless. One of them managed to land a blow, sending her crashing into a wall. She cried out, the light around her dimming. Ethan's heart lurched. "Alara!" She pushed herself to her feet, her silver eyes blazing with determination. "Keep going," she shouted. "Don't stop." Ethan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus. He flipped the final switch, and the control panel lit up with warning lights. "It's done," he yelled. "We have 5 minutes to get out of here." The escape. Alara fought her way back to the control room, her movements slower but no less determined. "The access tunnel is this way," she said, grabbing Ethan's arm. Together, they sprinted through the facility, the sounds of the failing turbines echoing around them. The ground shook as the dam structure began to give way, cracks spreading through the walls. The access tunnel was narrow and dark, its air damp and cold. Ethan's lungs burned as they ran, his legs threatening to give out. But Alara's grip on his arm kept him moving. "Almost there," Alara said, her voice strained. They emerged onto a narrow ledge overlooking the river, the roaring water below illuminated by the first light of dawn. Behind them, the dam shuddered violently, a low rumble building in its depths. "Jump!" Alara shouted, pulling Ethan with her as she leapt into the river. The icy water enveloped them, the current dragging them downstream as the dam erupted in a blinding explosion. The shockwaves sent waves crashing over them, but they managed to stay afloat, clinging to a piece of debris. The aftermath. Hours later, Ethan and Alara crawled onto the riverbank, exhausted but alive. The remains of the dam smoldered in the distance, a testament to their desperate gamble. Ethan collapsed onto the grass, his chest heaving. "We made it," he said, his voice hoarse. Alara nodded, her silver eyes glowing faintly. "For now." Ethan propped himself up on his elbows, looking at her. "Your people, do you think they'll come?" Alara held up the communicator, which now pulsed with a steady glow. The signal was sent. "They'll find us." Ethan smiled faintly, his exhaustion giving way to relief. "Good. Because I don't think I can fight another wave of those things." Alara chuckled softly, the sound melodic. "You've done enough, Ethan. More than enough." As they sat together on the riverbank, the first signs of a ship appeared in the sky, a sleek, silver vessel descending toward them. Alara's expression brightened, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "They're here," she said softly. Ethan watched as the ship landed, its doors opening to reveal more beings like Alara, tall, graceful, and glowing with the same silvery light. They approached cautiously, their eyes scanning Ethan with curiosity and gratitude. Alara turned to him, her expression earnest. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." Before he could respond, she leaned forward, placing a hand on his chest. A faint glow emanated from her palm, and he felt a warmth spread through him, in a connection, a bond. "You'll always be part of our story," she said, her voice filled with emotion. As Alara and her people prepared to leave, Ethan stood on the riverbank, watching their ship ascend into the sky. His quiet life had been forever changed, but as he stared at the stars, he felt a strange sense of peace. "Goodbye, Alara," he murmured. "And good luck." The story ends with Ethan returning to his cabin, a faint silver light glowing in the distance as the ship disappeared into the stars.